Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gen AI Talk in 10, brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. I'm Brad. He's Satish. Satish, let's talk about explainability. This is a topic that comes up quite a bit with regard to generative AI because Gen AI, after all, is a bit of a black box. That there's no transparency or explainability into why it's producing the outputs that it produces. And this can be a point of concern. It can be a risk to most companies that they want to put some guardrails around. So let me pass that over to you and let you break down this very interesting topic of explainability.
Thanks, Fred. So AI explainability refers to the ability to understand and interpret how these AI models make their decisions, right? Brad, you mentioned transparency. The other thing is trust, right? Trust is big. So, by having explainability, it ensures that both transparency and trust is there in the AI systems, both decision making processes. That's number one, and the outputs that the AI systems are giving us, right? If you remember, when we talk to customers, they always say, how do I know? How do I trust this output that I'm getting from the AI system? If somebody were to explain to me how I'm getting it, then I would trust it more, right? So this whole concept of explainability. Now let's delve a little deeper into why explainability matters, right? First is, of course, trust and accountability. Builds the confidence. You've seen this with a lot of our customers where they're not as confident about why they got a certain output. So that's one. But if you're using AI to make your decisions or to augment your decision-making capability, then these decisions could be traced and verified. So that's the trust and accountability factor. The second thing is legal and regulatory compliance. Because as we talked about in the last episodes, all these regulations are coming into place, and there are some legal standards around the explainability, because otherwise, how do you comply to, for example, in Europe, how do you comply to the EU AI Act? There is GDPR, which includes, the right to an explanation, if a customer asks for it, right? So legal and regulatory compliance is number two. Number three is, in terms of the business value, right? Because it enhances decision making, you can rely on that decision if there is explainability. Number four is ethics and bias. So, a big part of, the concerns around if there's a lack of transparency or explainability, the concern is there a bias in anything that we're doing because we are relying on the AI black box too much without understanding why it's providing us a certain output, why it's giving me a certain decision. So basically, it's trying to provide fairness and prevent discrimination. The last one is an interesting one. I think for any technologies out there, they'll really appreciate this one. Because you can explain how a model arrived at a decision or an output, now you can debug and refine that model, right? Because I know how I got there. Now I can go back, retrace my path. And so it actually improves model performance because it is providing insights into, if the model made an error, right? If it provided an output that was not correct, or if it was even, somewhat biased, now we know, because there's explainability, we know how do we address that, right? So very fascinating field, both from a business standpoint and a technology standpoint.
Yeah. And as you said, we talked about regulations in the last two episodes. I noticed that one of the recent bills that's under discussion right now in California is directly related to transparency. It is saying that companies deploying AI systems must disclose details about the data they're using for training and whether personal information is involved. So that really ties directly to what you're saying. It's in this case a regulation that is being considered for the state of California to improve the transparency and the explainability around what Gen AI is doing.
Absolutely.
Satish, could you talk about how companies, including our customers, are using their digital workforce, their RPA digital workers, to help in this area of explainability, where digital workers are actually provisioning Gen AI to automate, to broaden the scope of automation. But how are they also playing a role in this area of explainability, which continues to, again, give companies a lot of concern?
No, it's a great question and very relevant one for our time, right? So if you go back to what the foundational strengths of Blue Prism and look at our governance framework, that starts to give you clues. First is making sure you are getting the right information, right? Whether it's curating and getting the right information, because part of the challenge sometimes in getting reliable output is based on getting reliable input, right? Because if there are multiple versions of documents, let's say, right, it's hard to, because you get certain output. If there are too many versions, then it's hard to explain how you got that output. So if you can curate and have that digital worker get the latest and greatest information, if there's multiple documents, say, right, then you're controlling what you're doing on the input side and driving better explanation on the output side. The second thing I would say is around this idea of generating exceptions when something doesn't seem right. And so, for example, if you're getting an output that seems out of place, or if for example, you could also use multiple models to see if you're getting the same or similar output. And if one is off, now you know that there's something wrong with the possibly wrong with one or both models, right? And so you can now challenge that model and raise an exception and do this at scale. So digital workers can be leveraged to track some of this, right? The traceability part. And third is, the auditability that we provide. Because we know exactly where something came from and how it was handled throughout that workflow, right? And even going to the output, now you have a way when you want to explain something, this auditability that we have can help that customer retrace the steps and go back to all the different sources data came from, what happened to that data, who touched it, whether it was a human or even a system that went through. Now you have a better chance of being able to explain what happened throughout that workflow, right? So these are some examples, or scenarios where I think Blue Prism plays a very important role.
Okay. I want to ask you one last question. Are there ways in which Gen AI is used where explainability maybe isn't so important to have at your disposal? And I'm thinking about those cases where you're using Gen AI for more creative purposes, where hallucination may be a positive thing. You're creating a new slogan or a new product name or an advertising jingle. And in that case, you're looking for Gen AI to give you an idea that has not existed before, to be completely new, completely different. Is that a good example of where they care about the explainability?
It's actually a great example. I was listening to something this morning where one of the creators of Pixar, within the Pixar movie studios, the guy actually said, people think hallucination is bad. I actually think hallucination is good for my work because of what you said. I don't care how it generated that fancy logo or how it created this really cool image, right? Because it doesn't matter, because it's creating something new out of maybe for things it has been trained on, but it doesn't matter because it's something completely new. But this is where explainability probably doesn't matter, right?
Right. Well, it's been fun talking to you about this topic, Satish. Thank you. Thank you for your perspective. And we will see all of you next time on Gen AI Talk in 10.